This is part 2 of a 3-part story. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I recommend starting there so everything makes sense. Now, here's what happened next. I drove straight to Mr. Peterson's office. He read the forged document twice, then placed it flat on his desk like a wound that needed air. "Miss Price," he said, "this is serious." "I don't want to press charges," I said automatically. "Then we'll file a protective notice with the court. No transfers can be executed without your verified consent. But you need to understand your parents may escalate." "I know." He looked at me, almost fatherly. "People reveal themselves around money. Sometimes that's the only truth we get." Outside, the air smelled of thawing earth. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my purse as if it contained my heartbeat. Somewhere deep in the city, a siren wailed, a sound halfway between warning and lament. That night, I called Ryan. "I reported it," I said. "Good." His voice was quiet. "I told them to stop. They won't listen." "Then you have to choose," I said. "I already did." Silence. "Then, you okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm done being quiet." He exhaled. "That's something." After we hung up, I sat at the table and turned the silver dollar in my hand. The edges were worn smooth. I thought about Uncle Martin's voice. Money isn't evil, it's a mirror. If that was true, my parents were finally seeing themselves. And I was finally seeing me. The next morning I woke to light that felt intrusive, almost accusatory. Sun through the blinds carved bright bars across my desk where the forged papers lay under a glass weight. I stared at the notary seal, so official, so smug, and realized how easily paper could impersonate truth. I made coffee that tasted like burnt intentions and called Mr. Peterson. He answered on the first ring. "Good," he said simply, as though he'd been expecting me. "We start by documenting everything." He walked me through the steps: sworn affidavit of forgery, certified copies, a statement of identity at the county clerk's office. It all sounded bureaucratic until he added, "If they submit anything else, the system will flag it. They'll know they're being watched." That was the first time I heard the word they used about my parents. The county clerk's office was beige and humming with fluorescent fatigue. I stood in line behind a woman renewing a dog license and a man complaining about a parking fine. When my turn came, I slid the documents through the window to a clerk who smelled faintly of peppermint and coffee. "Forgery?" she asked, eyebrows rising. "Yes," I said, and the word came out steadier than I expected. She stamped the papers with a heavy thunk, the kind that makes permanence audible. "You did the right thing, hon." Outside, the spring air felt newly sharp. I half expected sirens, confrontation, something cinematic. But the world just kept going: cars, birds, the faint buzz of someone's lawnmower. I realized the most frightening betrayals happen in silence. That weekend, Ryan came over again. He looked tired, his eyes rimmed in the gray of too much family mediation. "They're furious," he said, dropping onto my couch. "Dad says you humiliated him. Mom says you're possessed by greed." I set a mug of tea in front of him. "Greed? For keeping what was legally left to me?" He shrugged helplessly. "I'm not defending them. You're trying to keep the peace." He rubbed his temples. "There's no peace to keep." We sat in quiet solidarity, the television murmuring news no one cared about. "After a while," he said, "Dad's talking about hiring a lawyer. He thinks if he can prove Martin was mentally unfit." I laughed, low and bitter. "Martin balanced his checkbook to the penny the day before he died." "I know," Ryan said. "But logic doesn't work on them. It's about pride now." I looked at him. "If they sue, will you testify?" He hesitated. "For you, yes. But I'll still lose them." "We both already did," I said. The official notice arrived 2 weeks later. Petition for contest of will, allegation of undue influence and lack of capacity. The envelope was thick, the paper heavy, embossed with the name of a firm my father could not afford but somehow had hired anyway. Mr. Peterson read it silently, then sighed. "They're claiming your uncle was manipulated. That you took advantage of his deteriorating health." "He wasn't deteriorating," I said. "He jogged every morning." "I know. And so will the court." He slid a copy toward me. "They've requested discovery of correspondence and financial records." It's not unusual, but it will feel invasive. How long does this process take? Months, he said. Maybe a year. The thought hollowed me out. That night, I went through my drawers and found every scrap of Uncle Martin I'd kept: birthday cards, old emails, a Polaroid of us on his porch with me holding a cookie sheet of failed biscuits. His handwriting was as clean as his life, deliberate, unslanted. I spent hours scanning documents, labeling folders evidence A, letters, evidence B, photos. Each click of the scanner felt like a heartbeat. By dawn, I had built a digital defense of love. When the sun rose, I made tea and read his last Christmas card. Integrity compounds quietly, it said. Keep your accounts balanced, even the invisible ones. For the first time, I understood he hadn't been talking about money. Depositions began in June at a rented conference room in White Plains. The carpet smelled of anxiety and coffee. My parents sat opposite me. Their lawyer, a sleek man with an expensive tie, flanked them like a hired conscience. Mr. Peterson leaned toward me. Answer only what's asked. Their lawyer smiled like a shark testing water. Miss Price, when did you last see your uncle prior to his death? 2 weeks before, I said. And you were alone? Yes. Discussing his finances? No. We were comparing bank interest rates. Would you describe that as financial advice? I felt Mr. Peterson's hand on my sleeve, a small grounding weight. She's already answered, he said. The lawyer tilted his head. Just clarifying motive. My mother flinched as if struck. I couldn't tell if it was shame or performance. My father's gaze stayed on the table, his fingers worrying a cufflink. For a moment I saw him not as an adversary, but as a man terrified of irrelevance. When it was his turn, he spoke smoothly about family understanding and joint stewardship. Then he slipped. I always said Martin was too attached to Claire. The opposing lawyer perked up. Attached how? My father froze. My mother's nails clicked against the armrest. Mr. Peterson smiled politely. I think we can end there. After the session, I sat in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel until the leather warmed. Ryan texted, "How'd it go?" Exhausting, I typed. They looked like strangers. They are, he replied. Weeks stretched into months. Court dates postponed, motions filed. I kept working, commuting on the Hudson line with commuters whose concerns were mercifully impersonal deadlines, rent, summer humidity. In the evenings, I'd return to the house that was now legally mine but emotionally occupied by ghosts. The neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Klein from across the street cornered me by the mailbox. Your parents all right, dear? Heard there's some unpleasantness over your uncle's estate. I smiled tightly. Just paperwork. She nodded, satisfied with the performance. Gossip requires no proof, only tone. Inside, I poured wine I didn't want and stared at the framed photo of Martin on the mantel. You left me the truth, I told him softly. You didn't warn me it would be expensive. By autumn, the case moved to preliminary hearing. A gray-stoned courthouse, the flag limp in windless air. My parents arrived flanked by their lawyer. Ryan sat behind me on the left, alone. I could feel his loyalty like a silent vow. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes, reviewed the file, her expression unreadable. We'll proceed with affidavits, she said. No need for drama. Their lawyer began the performance. Phrases like sudden favoritism, emotional dependency, alienation of affection. Each accusation sounded rehearsed, smooth as glass. Mr. Peterson rose slowly, papers in hand. Your Honor, the deceased was of sound mind. His physician's affidavit confirms it. His tax records likewise. And the plaintiff's suggestion that affection constitutes manipulation is at best a projection. The judge's eyebrows twitched, just slightly. Noted. When it was over, she set a date for summary judgment. 6 weeks. Outside, the air smelled of rain. My father brushed past without looking at me. My mother whispered something that might have been why or how. Ryan touched my shoulder. You okay? I nodded. Just tired. Want to get dinner? Not yet, I said. I need to sit with this. He nodded, understanding the language of exhaustion. That night, I found myself at Uncle Martin's grave. The cemetery was small, quiet except for crickets and the low rush of traffic from the parkway. I sat on the damp grass, knees pulled to my chest. I'm trying, I whispered. I'm keeping the accounts balanced. A breeze moved through the trees, stirring the bouquet someone else had left. I imagined him chuckling softly. Good. Now breathe. I did counting, studying, finding rhythm again. The courthouse that morning smelled like wet paper and old varnish. Lawyers moved in pairs like chess pieces that had learned to walk, passing through metal detectors with the bored precision of frequent flyers. I sat beside Mr. Peterson at counsel table, palms pressed flat to the grain of the wood, and counted my breathing the way you count the seconds in a thunderstorm. Across the aisle, my parents took their seats. My mother's mouth was a line iron too hard. My father adjusted his tie as if dress could hold shape where truth might not. Their lawyer, the sleek one with the practiced smile, leaned in to whisper something, and both of them nodded in a rhythm that felt rehearsed. Today is on paper, Mr. Peterson murmured. No theatrics. If it gets noisy, that's their strategy, not ours. The clerk called the calendar. In the matter of the estate of Martin Price. A simple sentence that contained all our history. Judge Halvorson took the bench, late 60s, gray hair, the kind of face that had learned how not to react. She adjusted her glasses, scanned the docket, and said, "We'll proceed on petitioner's contest and respondent's motion for summary judgment." Appearances? Their lawyer rose. Stephen N. Wells for the petitioners, Richard and Elaine Price. Mr. Peterson stood. Arthur Peterson, for the respondent, Claire Price. The judge nodded. Counsel, I've read your submissions. Mr. Wells, as the moving party on the contest, you may begin. Wells did the thing trial lawyers do when they want gravity for free. He left a beat of silence, then stepped into it. Your Honor, he said, this is a case about undue influence masquerading as affection. The decedent, Martin Price, in the months preceding his death, formed an abnormal dependency on his niece. He revised his will to exclude his brother and sister-in-law, long-standing family beneficiaries, leaving his entire fortune to a single, younger relative who, while no doubt fond of him, stood to benefit enormously. We intend to show that this will is not the product of free agency, but the result of manipulation by a beneficiary in a confidential relationship. He paused. My mother looked at the floor. My father watched the judge like a man selling weather. Mr. Peterson didn't rise. He just uncapped his pen and wrote a single line on his legal pad, then slid it toward me. He just framed motive. We will frame facts. Call your first witness, the judge said. They began with the family doctor, a square-shouldered man in his 50s wearing the discomfort of a suit like a misdiagnosis. Doctor, Wells said, you treated Mr. Price? For 15 years. In your clinical opinion, did his cognitive abilities decline in the year before his death? No, the doctor said. Routine labs. Blood pressure well controlled. He did his own medication reconciliation. He joked that he trusted me for bones and blood, not for tax advice. Murmurs. Wells pressed. Any memory issues? Confusion? Repetition. Normal aging, the doctor said. Not impairment. He was sharper than most 50-year-olds. Wells pivoted. Did he ever mention an unusual reliance on his niece? Unusual. The doctor tilted his head. He spoke proudly of her. That's not a symptom. Peterson declined cross. No need to clean what wasn't dirty. Next came their handwriting expert, a man with stylus thin fingers and the self-importance of someone who finds meaning in loops. Professor Adler, Wells said, you've reviewed the will and the codicil? Yes. In your opinion, was the signature on the codicil executed several months before Mr. Price's death consistent with his baseline signature? Adler removed a pair of readers, set them on the rail like he was placing a delicate bird on a fence. Entirely consistent. Firm pen pressure, consistent slant, no tremor artifacts. And the dates? Consistent. Wells shifted. But you did note increased frequency in check writing to the respondent, my client's niece, shortly before the codicil? Adler bristled. I'm a document examiner, not a forensic accountant. The checks bore his signature. To whom he wrote them is beyond my scope. Nothing further, Wells said, a little too quickly. Peterson stood, measured. Professor, Did you examine any document purporting to bear Ms. Price's signature other than the will she did not sign? Adler looked at the judge, uncertain. No. Peterson nodded, almost kindly. Thank you. They put my father on next. He swore to tell the truth and then tried to make a home out of it. Mr. Price, Wells began, describe your relationship with your brother. Close, my father said. We were always a family-first household. Holidays together, advice, support. And with your daughter? My father smiled. Good. But Claire is independent. Did you notice any change in your brother's behavior toward you in the year before his death? He became distant, my father said. He stopped coming to dinners. He wouldn't return calls. We later learned Claire had been inserting herself. Inserting herself how? Accompanying him to bank appointments. Encouraging him to keep secrets. He was always private, but this was different. Did he confide in you about his will? No. He knew I'd tell him to be fair. Peterson stood for cross and didn't bother with the preface. Mr. Price, you testified you and your brother were close. Yes. You also testified he was private. Yes. Did you ever ask him who he wanted to leave his estate to? No. So when you say he knew you'd tell him to be fair, you're not speaking from any actual conversation with him about his testamentary wishes. My father's jaw tightened. I know my brother. Peterson let the pause do the work. Is it fair that your brother, a widower with no children, might leave his estate to someone he described under oath to the drafting attorney as the closest thing to a daughter? Not fair to us, my father said, and something raw cracked through. Thank you, Peterson said, voice gentle. Nothing further. My mother followed. Wells softened his tone as if kindness would be admissible. Mrs. Price, did your brother-in-law spend significant time with your daughter? Yes, she said. He preferred her. He built her up. Built her up? Made her feel like she couldn't be wrong. And did that create tension at home? My mother's eyes glistened. She had always known where to put tears. It divided us. Peterson approached slowly. Mrs. Price, did Mr. Price ever ask you for money? What? No. Did he ever ask you to manage his accounts? No. Did he ever ask you to accompany him to a lawyer? No. Thank you. Then it was me. Miss Price, Wells said, all courteous corners, you spent time alone with your uncle shortly before his death. Yes. Bank visits? Financial discussions. Sometimes. He liked to talk through choices. You suggested choices? He asked what I thought. You understood you stood to gain financially from his decisions. I didn't know the contents of his will. Wells stepped closer, lowering his voice like intimacy. But you knew he favored you. I knew he loved me, I said. You introduced him to your attorney, Mr. Peterson. I blinked. No. He had known Mr. Peterson for years. Wells's smile thinned. You discussed interest rates. Yes. You discussed risk. We discussed life. He hesitated, recalibrating. Did you encourage Mr. Price to exclude your parents from his will? No. Did you ever ask what he planned to do with his estate? No. Did he ever give you gifts in the year before his death? Yes. What kind? I swallowed. Books. A check when I moved apartments. He turned to the judge as if presenting a rabbit. A check. For how much? 5,000, I said. He said I should have an emergency fund. Wells faced the bench. No further questions. Peterson rose and walked only 2 steps. Claire, he said, his use of my first name landing like a hand on my shoulder, did your uncle ever ask you to influence him? No. What did he ask? To be honest, I said. To think in long horizons. Did he ever ask you to keep secrets from your parents? No. He didn't talk to them about money because he didn't talk to anyone about money. Peterson nodded. Did you know how much he was worth? No, I said. I found out when they did. He paused, then, did you forge your signature on any document transferring your inheritance? Wells stood. Objection beyond scope, prejudicial. Overruled, the judge said without looking up. She may answer. No, I said, steady. I did not. Peterson returned to the counsel table, no flourish, the way a person sits after setting down something fragile. They called Mr. Peterson next as a fact witness, and for the first time I understood how a man can be both oak and shade. Mr. Peterson, Wells said, you drafted Mr. Price's will. Yes. Alone? Or with Ms. Price's input? Alone, Peterson said. At my office. Twice. He was explicit. He wanted his estate to go to Claire. He said, and I quote, "She is the closest thing I have to a daughter, and she conducts herself with restraint." He believed his brother was again, quoting, overcommit to appearances. A small sound escaped my mother. Wells's jaw flexed. You witnessed capacity? Yes. As did two other witnesses whose affidavits are in the record. Wells tried another door. You're now representing Ms. Price. You stand to gain fees from her retaining the inheritance. Peterson didn't blink. I'd be paid whether she won or lost. I told Mr. Price to select any counsel he wished. He selected me because I had drafted his documents for 10 years. Wells spread his hands, the I tried gesture. Nothing further. Last came the bank manager, a woman in her 40s with efficient hair and the calm of someone who keeps other people's money in straight lines. Ms. Gomez, Wells said, did you observe the decedent at your branch in the months before his death? Yes. With Ms. Price. Sometimes. Did Ms. Price ever direct transactions? No. Did she ever speak for Mr. Price? No. Did Mr. Price appear confused? No, Gomez said, almost amused. He corrected me when I misspoke an interest rate once. That man could do APR in his head. Peterson smiled. Thank you, Ms. Gomez. Nothing further. When the evidence closed, Wells rose for his summation. He reheated the same words: dependence, favoritism, isolation, until they smelled like overcooked food. He gestured toward me with an open hand, as though offering the court a specimen. We don't doubt Ms. Price's affection, he said. But affection can be a lever. The law protects families from lopsided wills born of influence and secrecy. Peterson stood as if he had all afternoon. The law protects free will, he said simply. Mr. Price was competent. He made a choice he memorialized in writing, witnessed by 3 people and reaffirmed by a codicil months before his death. Petitioners have shown hurt feelings, not undue influence. He turned his palms up. Estate planning is not a feel-good exercise. It is the execution of intent. The decedent's intent is written, witnessed, and corroborated. The rest is weather. He sat. The room exhaled. Judge Halvorson removed her glasses and cleaned them with a small square of cloth, the way people do when they're deciding whether to be annoyed or precise. I've had the benefit of the papers and today's testimony, she began. A testator's capacity requires that he understand the nature and extent of his property, the natural objects of his bounty, and the disposition he is making. The record reflects that Mr. Price managed his own finances, corrected bank personnel on interest rates, and executed his will and codicil in the presence of counsel and witnesses who attest to his lucidity. She looked up, finally, and her gaze was not unkind. Undue influence must be proven by evidence, not inference. Petitioners offer suspicion, the decedent's affection for his niece, his preference to share financial conversations with her rather than with them. That is not undue influence. That is personality. A page turned somewhere, a pen fell and was stilled. The petition to invalidate the will is denied, she said. Respondent's motion for summary judgment is granted. The will is admitted to probate as drafted. Costs to respondent. Counsel may submit a narrow application for sanctions regarding the forged transfer instrument flagged by the clerk's office, if you wish. Wells began to rise, Your Honor, with respect to sanctions. The judge lifted a palm. Mr. Wells, sit. If your clients wish to repair their family, that's for the hallway, not this courtroom. We are adjourned. Her gavel was a small sound, but it freed the air. The hallway outside felt brighter, as if someone had opened a window you didn't know was there. My knees went soft with relief I didn't want to show. Mr. Peterson's hand was on my shoulder before I had to ask for it. You did well, he said. Did I? My voice shook. It feels like drowning quietly. That's still survival, he said. At the end of the corridor, my parents stood together like an emblem. My mother's eyes were glassy but dry. My father looked 20 years older. Wells spoke in low tones, hands moving as if he could still sell the next half hour to fate. Ryan broke from them and came toward me. No dramatics, no speeches. He simply reached and took my hand the way we used to cross streets when we were small. You okay? he asked, and this time it was not a formality. I think so. He nodded toward our parents. They're going to say things. Just don't let them turn today into a grievance story. They already have one, I said. Then write yours louder, he said softly. Or quieter, but truer. Our parents approached, Wells trailing. My mother stopped 2 paces away. For a second, her face wavered, an expression I recognized from childhood when she burned her hand on the oven rack and pretended she hadn't. If you wanted to hurt us, she said, voice thin with control, you succeeded. I didn't want to hurt anyone, I said. I wanted to honor his choice. My father stared at Mr. Peterson instead of me. We'll appeal. Peterson's tone was neutral. You may. You will lose. Something in my father sagged then, a thread cut. He turned away without a word. My mother followed, posture perfect. Wells offered me a nod that wasn't quite apology. Good day, Miss Price. You too, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. The man had just done his job. Outside, the sky was a shy blue. There were no cameras, no crowd. This was not news to anyone but us. We stood on the steps for a minute, 3 people who had become a smaller family without ceremony. Are you going to file for sanctions? Ryan asked, eyes flicking to Peterson. The forged transfer. The judge's invitation had sat on the table like a loaded word. Peterson spoke gently. Sanctions are not jail. They're fines and findings. We'd win. I didn't answer right away. In my mouth, the idea tasted like ash. If the goal is to punish, no, I said. If the goal is to stop them from doing it again. It already has, Peterson said. The clerk's flag remains. Any filing attempts ping the system. You are insulated. Then let it be, I said. No sanctions. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I'll file costs only. When he left to retrieve certified copies, Ryan and I walked to the edge of the plaza where a fountain threw water up and caught it again, tireless. You didn't have to be kind, he said. I'm not sure I am, I said. Maybe I'm just tired. He smiled a little. Tired is the cousin of kind. We sat on the rim of the fountain like teenagers and watched a toddler throw pennies with the solemnity of ritual. His mother said, make a wish, and he squeezed his eyes shut as if darkness were important to magic. What did you wish for when you were little? Ryan asked. For rooms where love landed evenly, I said. Did it ever? I thought of Uncle Martin sliding a silver dollar across a table. For when you feel unseen. Of his steady voice, integrity compounds quietly. Of the judge's sentence that sounded like a door locking and a window opening at the same time. Not evenly, I said. But sometimes precisely. That evening, I took the train home alone, forehead against the cool glass, river unwinding silver beside me. I expected triumph to feel louder. Instead, peace came like a careful houseguest took off its shoes, put its bag by the door, sat at the edge of the couch, and waited to be invited in. On my kitchen table, I laid out the certified order and the judge's stamped decision. The ink was still slightly raised, as if the truth needed topography. I poured tea and opened Martin's last note to me, the one I'd read until the folds went soft. Build something good, it said. Help others see what you already know. Worth is never granted by approval, but by conscience. I set the note beside the court order. One document admitted me to probate. The other admitted me to a different kind of adulthood. In the quiet, I took the silver dollar from my wallet and placed it on the paper. It made a small sound, not a gavel, but definitive. Then I breathed 1, 2, 3, breathe 1, 2, 3, breathe until the room steadied around me. Tomorrow would be the long quiet, the years. Tonight was a verdict, not just the court's, but mine. I would not prosecute. I would not forget. I would build. Thank you for listening to part 2 of this 3-part story. In part 3, things finally reach a resolution, but not in the way anyone expected. I'll see you in the final part.